everybody, namaste. I am sitting here in the vegetable gardens of Ananda Sisi together with a very dear and old friend, Mahiya, who has lived in this community, Ananda Sisi, for 21 years or something. And she is very active in the community. But before we talk about her role here, I'd like to ask you some questions more about your personal experience of the spiritual path. So can you tell us something about how it all started for you?
How I came to Ananda?
How you came first onto the spiritual path?
Spiritual path. Well, like coming to Ananda and coming on the spiritual path was almost the same thing. I was very young, I mean, relatively speaking. I was about 21 years when I started to get really interested in the spiritual path. I was, like many people, I was doing hatha yoga and loving it. I did that.
Where are we? In London?
I'm in England,
okay.
In like 1999,
okay.
and in Leeds, where I was at university, and there I discovered yoga, and I just got passionate about yoga. So every morning I'd get up at 5:30 in the morning and I'd do yoga. And when I left university, I thought, you know, I don't want to do anything else. All I want to do is be a yoga teacher. And my friends were looking for careers in radio and television because I studied the media, mass media. So I could have, you know, furthered my career in that way, but it didn't interest me whatsoever. And I knew that the only thing that resounded with me was yoga, but it was just purely physical, hatha yoga. And then I started to hear words like chakras and energy, and so I thought, what's all this about? So I asked for some books on to explore deeper what yoga's all about. And I got 4 books at Christmas, and I started reading them, and I started to discover that yoga was much, much more than just, you know, a
physical.
Gymnastic, physical. And from there, it was very, very quick. So that was in the January of the year 2000, and by November of the year 2000, I was living in Ananda Sisi. So what happened in those 11 months was I started at first to look for any meditation group, and I found a meditation group. I started to explore concepts like we have control of our thoughts. It's not what happens to us externally, but what we live inside, which makes us happy or sad. We can control stress. I am the soul, I'm not the body. These were all new concepts to me. But it wasn't quite the right meditation group for me in the path. And what happened one day was a friend who I was living with, came home and said, I've got this book from the library. I don't understand a word of it, but I think you'll really like it. It's for you. And it was Super Consciousness, A Guide to Meditation by Swami Ananda. J. Donald Walters, it said. I read the whole thing. I understood nothing at all, but I knew I had to know that man because he had all the answers, and I felt very, very strongly that he was the one who would guide me. By then, my search had become passionate. It was the only thing that mattered to me in life. I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to know who I was, the reason for existence. I didn't want to live a superficial life. So by then, my whole focus was on finding truth and finding the person that could guide me. So I looked up on the internet J. Donald Walters, and up came the site of Ananda. And there was the picture of Swami Kriyananda and the picture of Yogananda, and it was instant. I knew that's where I need to go. So I booked for 3 months at the Expanding Light in California. Ananda Village. And I went there as on a work exchange program for the summer of the year 2000. And after that, in September, I thought, well, I'll go back to England and I'll get a job in London and I'll, you know, continue my meditations. I'll find a meditation group. But I didn't want to live in a community. This is a very strange thing, because those who know me now know that I'm totally pro-community. But at the time, I thought, honestly, that communities were for weak people who couldn't manage living a spiritual life in the world. So they needed some kind of protection and extra help. So I had no intention at all to come to Ananda Sisi. I had no intention to live in a community. I thought, oh, maybe I'll visit Ananda Sisi in 2 years, but I wasn't interested. And I looked for a meditation group in England, and all the doors were closed. There was I couldn't find anything. There was just 2 devotees here and 1 devotee in the southwest of England, and there was nothing going on. And so I'd been back in England for 5 days, all of 5 days, when I understood that there was something wrong in me, that it was my ego that was insisting that I would do it like this, and this. And I was making all of the decisions myself, and I was knocking at doors that weren't the right doors and they were closed. So at that point I just said, okay, I understand. And then I prayed very deeply and sincerely to Yogananda with a lot of depth of my soul. It was really one of the deepest prayers I've ever prayed. It was passionate and it was desperate, actually, because I did want to know truth, and so I didn't want to do just what I was interested in. I said, you know, tell me where I need to go and where I need to live. And I asked for a sign. I said, you know, I don't have visions, I can't feel things, I can't, you know, I need something concrete, very, very clear that I can't misunderstand. And the next day my friend came into the room where I was staying and said, oh, my parents sent me a postcard, do you want to see it? I said, yeah, sure. And as he turned the postcard around, it was like when you go into slow motion in a movie, and it was just me and that postcard, and everything else didn't exist. It was an amazing experience. It was like my ego stepped out of the way, and it was just my soul completely knowing that was my sign. So the postcard was a picture of Assisi. And in that moment I knew, okay,
the city of Assisi,
you know, the typical postcard of Assisi, and it said Assisi. His parents were in Assisi, but my soul had asked that evening before for my very concrete sign, and the answer came in the morning. And you know, when you get that kind of sign, many people ask, well, how do you know, like, how to follow your intuition and your guidance? And it's a good question, because most of us a lot of the time don't get such clear guidance. You know, we're trying to develop intuition, and it's part of the process. But really, I can say, when you pray with so much fervor and so much desperation and so much just longing to know the answer, when you're completely open, because I was completely open in that moment, then it can happen that the sign is so clear you have no doubt.
Okay.
And I packed my suitcases, and because I knew I was going to live in Ananda, Assisi, and I'd never ever been here.
So the postcard said Assisi, and how did you make the step from Assisi to Ananda, Assisi?
It was, I knew it. I mean,
you Googled, or?
No, I knew Ananda, Assisi existed.
Okay. You already knew that? Okay.
Because I'd been at Ananda Village in California.
Yes, of course. True.
So I knew when I saw the postcard, Ananda, Assisi was my home. And I'd never been here. And I told my family and my friends, I'm going to live in Ananda, Assisi. And I packed 2 suitcases, and 6 weeks later I arrived on the doorstep at Ananda, Assisi, and I never left. Because it was so clear, I knew. I just knew. And even though it's been hard throughout these years, in some moments I really have wanted to run away and you know, and leave, deep down in my soul I knew, you know, I'm not going to leave ever. This is where I'm supposed to be.
So in a while we're going to talk a little bit about the challenges of community life.
Right, yeah.
First I wanted to go back to Ananda Village.
Yes.
So you were there, you were doing work exchange.
Yes.
You saw the community scene.
I did.
What were your impressions of that in that period? Because you went back to England, but you were not convinced yet of the community ideal.
Yeah, I think I was very young, and it was a lot to absorb and take in. Everything was new to me. And so I think as a young person, I wasn't yet ready to commit to something. I wasn't ready to commit to a guru. I wasn't ready to commit to one place, have a lot of energy inside me, a lot of creativity. And so I think that what I saw was beautiful, but I was wanting to explore life more. And also at that time in the Ananda Village, there weren't so many young people. Now it's completely different. There's a huge energy of young people. It's wonderful. So, you know, I had this relationship also when I came to Ananda Assisi. I was the youngest person here for 8 years. Mostly I was surrounded by people older than me, and that was tough. but I knew where I was supposed to be at that point. So my impressions of Ananda village was it was a beautiful place and the kindest people I'd ever met, wonderful souls, but you know, maybe a little bit too much for me to commit to.
Okay, so for you then, when did truth become God? When did it become devotion?
Well, that's a different question. First, did it become truth was when I asked for these books on yoga, and there were 4 of them, and the first one I opened and it started talking about universal mind, or, you know, these new age concepts, and I was like, that's a bit strange, you know, but I could kind of digest it. The second one talked about something like consciousness. I'm like, okay, that's also a bit, you know, what's going on here. And then it got more and more serious as I opened a third book. Somewhere along it mentioned the word God.
Which was, the third book was already the one by Swami?
No, this was this was 4 months before Swami.
Okay.
So that word God was a big issue for me. That was a block. And I closed it and said, yoga's got nothing to do with God. This book's invalid, doesn't know what it's talking about. And the 4th book I opened up, on the very first page, it went straight to the word God. And at that point, I said, okay, and I knew that I was a truth seeker in that moment, I think, when I opened that 4th book. And I said to myself, if there's a message here coming through, a door has been opened, this word God has been opened, and I can't close the door. You know, if there's something here which is trying to be communicated to me, I have to know what it is. I have to explore further. And I think that's when I knew that I was a truth seeker. So from then on, my search became for truth and God, but God was a very difficult concept for me. But luckily, in the teachings of yoga, we can get around the word God quite easily by using other terminology. In the end, it's all, you know, it's just a word for describing something which everybody's talking about on all spiritual paths, that inner contact with a reality which is your origin, you know, much bigger than you. And yeah.
Beautiful, thank you. Now we are in Ananda Sisi.
Okay.
You've just moved here.
22 years old.
Yeah. One challenge is the age.
Yes.
You were for 8 years the youngest person. Mention can you tell a story about those first years and some of the challenges, or just one of the challenges?
Some of the challenges.
Or only one?
Well, as a 22-year-old, I still wanted to do, you know, to do things as 22-year-olds like to do. So we like to play and have adventures and stay up late at night. I remember my first New Year's here, and we were in the temple, and it was just very nice. We meditated and we had readings, and then there was the gong at midnight. And then I looked around and went, so when's the party starting? You know, because my New Year's Eves until then had been, you know, we go to London,
party until 3, 4 in the morning.
No, all night.
Yeah.
You know, you stay up all night and you party and whatever. So it was very hard for me that I mean, I'm not saying I wanted to go out like to a nightclub or drinking and those types of things, but just as a young person, you have a totally different need than somebody who's already lived through those years.
Yes.
So that was my biggest challenge, that I had very deep soul connections with so many people that for me were like fathers, mothers, aunts, older sisters. I was kind of like the adopted new, you know, daughter in the family, and I received a lot of love. But I want to mention one particular friend I had, who was my savior. She's called Ronya. And from Germany, and she arrived a few months before I arrived, and we just, because of the connection,
your age, more or less,
same age, 1 year older, and she and I became very close friends, and we would have the most amazing adventures together. You know, everything would sleep out under the stars, camp out, you know, make fires on the beach, and camp out. We'd go hiking for hours and hours cross country, and go swimming in February in the waterfalls, and just all these crazy things, and stay up talking. And so I managed to, you know, live my, let's say, my young years with satisfying also that need to have the more
Wonderful.
energetic and adventurous connection. Not
Yeah.
everybody has that, but I apparently did.
Okay. So when did you meet Donald Walters, Swami Kriyananda,
yes,
for the first time?
Swami Kriyananda. I met him, it must have been a few days after I arrived. And
He was here in that period.
he was here, and in those years, Swami Kriyananda was very present in the community. He'd drop into the dining room on his way home from town. He'd come and do satsangs in the temple on Saturdays. He'd do Sunday service on Sundays. And so I remember I was very newly arrived, and we were in the dining room, and Swami was on his way home from town, and he decided to drop in at the dining room and just say hi. So he went around saying hi to everybody who he knew, and then he got to me, and I was a new arrival. So he stopped and he asked me, oh, who are you? Welcome. What's your name? And so I turned bright red, of course, and told him my name, and he said, where are you from? Where do you live? And when, I don't know if you do it, but I do, when I get embarrassed, I just say the most stupid things, or at least I did. And so I just came out with this really stupid answer. I said, I don't really live anywhere. I don't have a house or a home. I'm just a lost soul. Like that, I said.
Just joking.
Just joking,
Yeah.
just trying to...
Joking your way out of embarrassment.
Joking my way out of it. And Swami Kriyananda looked at me very seriously. And, like most people, when you have that kind of conversation, they go, oh yeah, ha ha ha, me too. Well, we're all trying to find ourselves. Or, they'll answer back with the same energy, but Swami never did that. He never dropped to your energy in the negative way, I mean. He always lifted your understanding and your consciousness up and was a mirror. So he looked at me very clearly and he said, you're not a lost soul. And those words meant so much to me, and they still do, because for me that was like my welcome home. You're not a lost soul, you're home. So that was my first meeting with Swami.
Can you tell us the Be a Good Girl story?
Yeah. So I don't have many stories with Swami because I wasn't
but this is a very strong one.
In his close circles, but a few very significant meetings. So I was part of the choir, and to our good fortune, Swami always invited the choir whenever he gave conferences or events around the world or in Italy. And this particular time he had an event in Rome. It was probably a book launch, and so the whole choir went down to Rome. And after the event, we all went to the airport to say goodbye to Swami.
He was flying.
He was flying to America, I think, because he'd spend about 3 or 4 months in
Italy.
In Italy and 3 or 4 months in America. I mean, he'd divide his time up. And he went round and he said goodbye. It got to me and he said goodbye. And I said, oh, goodbye, Swami. And he looked at me and he said, be a good girl. And again, I came out with a stupid answer because I took it as of just a flippant comment. Be a good girl. He didn't mean that. And I said, oh, yeah, I will, Swami. I'll be a good girl, sure. And again, he looked at me again with that seriousness. He was really giving me the messages of my life. And he said, when I say be a good girl, I mean love God more and more every day. So that's been a guiding light of my life. And it's become more and more clear as my time has gone on in this path that that's really the only important path to me.
Sounds like a path of devotion, bhakti,
Yes.
but you also have a very strong will.
Yes. Can you have both? I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Apparently, yes.
Apparently, yes. I think that we're multi-layered, and sometimes what's on the surface hides something which is deeper inside of us that maybe has been hidden and protected over the years. We tend to create layers of protection, especially around the heart. And but this really is the path of devotion. As Swami Sri Yukteswar said, you can't put one foot on the spiritual path until you develop that love of the heart. And so even though sometimes you have to peel away layers and go deep, you know, that's
where the
devotion
essence
is there.
The essence, yeah.
You can touch it. So I learned in these years to touch something inside of myself. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about community life, which is really the most important aspects of your spiritual life. So, why did Swami Kriyananda want to build communities like this?
Swami Kriyananda said that Ananda exists to help each person take their next step spiritually.
But why do you need a community for that?
Why do you need a community? It's a great question. From my own experience, and I think the experience of everyone who comes here, I think one of the most important things is the spiritual support you get by those who are living the same ideals and the same lifestyle together with you. So everybody's doing the same. It's not that we're exact replicas of each other. Everybody is very individual. I mean,
even eccentric.
If you know this community, you know that everybody is very individual. We're all very strong personalities. Some people very eccentric. But one thing we have in common is that we're all trying to take our next step spiritually. We're all devotees of the Master Paramahansa Yogananda, and so we're all tuned in to this ray. And so we have spiritual practices together. We have service together. We eat together. We have opportunities to just spend time together. We have fun together. We play together. So all of this, when you put more than one person together, like Christ said, where two or more are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst. So there's more, we would use the terminology magnetism. It's Yogananda said environment is stronger than willpower. So the main purpose of spiritual communities is to create that environment, but there's others. I think one of the reasons why these communities exist is to be an example to the rest of the world, a model for an alternative way of living. And this is becoming very, very a predominant thought in the world right now. With everything in a way that we've created, all of these systems that we've created, whether it's the financial system or the consumerism system and or the educational system, all of this is kind of crashing. And we're realizing that something needs to change. It's not working. So we're offering an example, a living and successful example of a different way of life in which you can live simply but be incredibly happy.
You gave a very characteristic description of the community, and I live here too, so I can agree with you. But now for the skeptics, okay, how do you face conflict?
Yeah, I think the main
does it happen?
Yes, conflict happens
at
Ananda.
Right.
I'm declaring conflict happens at Ananda, but it's very different because everybody here, as I said earlier, is wanting to work on themselves and basically bring out the best in themselves and get rid of everything which is not the best.
So that's about like the condition, not so much imposed, but why you want to live here, right? I come to live here because I want to bring out the best in myself.
Yeah, that could be one of, I mean, that's kind of a sub-reason, let's say. Most people come here because they want truth, they want to find God, have God realization. So when there's conflict, what happens here, which doesn't usually happen anywhere else or very few other places, is both people take a step backwards and very honestly and inwardly ask, what's my part in this? Because our teachings say that it's never about what's happening outside of you, but there's always, if there's wrong in the world, Yogananda says, there's wrong inside of you. It doesn't mean that the other person is never wrong in their behavior. That's, of course, happens all the time. But you can't change other people. And unfortunately, we are always trying to change other people. So most of our concentration energy goes into, with our thoughts or with our words, trying to convince or tell other people that they're doing wrong actions and wrong behavior. And that's just a way of escaping the work we need to do on ourselves. And as I said before, that work is tough and it's painful. So the ego will do anything it can to avoid saying, what's my part that I need to change? So when there's conflict, each person says, okay, where's my part? What can I do? You know, what's my lesson?
There's mediation as well,
There's
right?
mediation. There can be, if it's a serious conflict, then there can be mediation. But most of the time, what I've seen again and again in my own personal experience, the day after or even minutes after, the person will come to me and say, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And that is has always really touched my heart. That it happens, but people generally say, I don't want to live in disharmony. I want to live in harmony. So I'm sorry.
We only have a few more minutes, and you have so much to share.
Gosh.
I'm going to ask you now. I'm going to ask you a very general question. You are very active in the community right now, giving guidance and friendship to new people who come. So what do you observe when you see new people come to this community and you see them grow? Is there anything special that you'd like to say? What does community life and the spiritual path, the combination, what can it do for you?
Well, it's interesting because we've just finished
your story.
Well, my story, but this in these days we've just finished guiding one of the groups. It's called the Living Discipleship Group, who have done this experience that everybody does when they come to live in this community of a 1 year period in which we study, we have classes, we have inspiration, we spend time together.
It's very intense, huh?
Oh, it's very intense. And so what happens in that year is incredible. You see that the person who started and the person who finished that year is a completely different person. So huge transformation. I think to live in community, the only way you the only way you survive here, it sounds funny to say, but the only way you survive is if you're completely open to inner transformation. Otherwise it's too hard.
But that's hard too. To be open to inner transformation.
It's very hard to be open to inner transformation. I always say that the challenge and the blessings go hand in hand. And the more challenge there is, the more blessings there are. You know, the more you feel that joy. So I think we don't really have much choice in the end of the day. The hardest thing about living in this community, I don't know about other communities, but this is a spiritual community. So why are we here? Because essentially we are seeking the truth. All of us are truth seekers or God seekers, whatever you want to call it. And in order to find that truth, you have to have an inner transformation daily. That means taking away a lot of the parts of ourselves that we have long identified with. And that hurts. You know, it's very painful and also very scary. Because you can think, if I take this away, then what's left? So the ego gets very panicky about, who am I and what am I if this doesn't exist and that doesn't exist. But the more you're able to let go, the more you're able to just surrender and flow with that experience of transformation, the more blessings and grace just flood in. So in the end, that gives you the energy and the courage to take your next step. So they go hand in hand. So you can't separate.
The challenges, that's nice. That could be the title of this interview. Challenges and blessings go hand in hand. Thank you so much. We could go on forever.
Yeah,
really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Darshan.